Welcome to the ATC Basics lesson. In this lesson, we will cover some definitions and base concepts that underlie any part of ATC. Starting with some terms related to navigation and altitude, we have heading. Heading is a 3-digit unit of measurement representing a direction relative to the 360 degrees of a magnetic compass. The compass is pictured here, with each cardinal direction, north, east, south, and west, being separated by 90 degrees to make a full 360-degree circle. Heading 0, 9, or 0 would represent east, 180 represents south, 270 west, and we represent north as heading 360, not 000. Next, radar vectors are ATC instructions that tell an aircraft to fly or turn to a certain heading. For example, telling an aircraft to fly heading 230 would tell the aircraft to fly approximately southwest. Regarding altitude, you'll have to know what a flight level is. Flight levels are another unit of measurement, this time representing hundreds of feet above mean sea level. To easily convert from feet to flight levels, you just remove the last two zeros from the altitude in feet. In this example, 12,000 feet becomes flight level 120. To convert from flight levels to feet, just add 2 zeros to the end of the flight level. Flight level 120 with 2 more zeros added to the end would equal 12,000 feet. In flight line, altitudes below 10,000 feet are simply said in feet, such as 6,000 feet or 9,000 feet. Altitudes at or above 10,000 feet, however, should be converted to flight levels, such as flight level 100 or flight level 120. Now that we've covered some basic terms, let's move on to flight rules. These are essentially sets of rules that pilots choose that determine how the flight will be operated. There are two main flight rules. IFR, or Instrument Flight Rules, is where pilots will rely on their instruments for navigation and rely on ATC for separation from other aircraft and obstructions. In the real world, these are mainly commercial or airliner flights and also private jets. Under IFR, pilots must follow more strict procedures and are completely under the control of ATC. However, they can also fly at higher altitudes and are guaranteed separation by ATC. The other main flight rule is VFR, or Visual Flight Rules. As the name might imply, pilots will instead fly and navigate with visual reference to different landmarks and have to look out for other traffic themselves to maintain separation. In the real world, these are mainly general aviation aircraft. While the pilot has more freedom to navigate themselves, they can still receive help from ATC. However, they are mainly responsible for separation from other aircraft, so they always have to keep an eye out. I've described the two flight rules pretty vaguely so far though, so let's get more specific. Under IFR, pilots have a set route that they file and are cleared by delivery for, and they stick to that route unless ATC tells them otherwise. On the other hand, under VFR, pilots will still file a flight plan, but once in the air, as long as they avoid other planes and terrain, they can still move around pretty freely. In this sense, you can often think of VFR as giving more freedom to the pilot, but as mentioned earlier, they also have more responsibility for separation. Next, vertically, IFR aircraft are again restricted by what ATC tells them to do, or otherwise what they filed in their flight plan. VFR are also restricted vertically, as they are only allowed to operate below 10,000 feet. However, instead of being restricted to a specific altitude ATC assigns, they are generally assigned a limit to how high they can fly and are free to climb or descend within that restriction. The biggest restriction for VFR is visibility. Since aircraft under VFR, Visual Flight Rules, have to navigate and avoid planes visually, the visibility must be 5 kilometers or greater. From the ATC side, the visibility is available in the top right of the screen, as pictured here. Since IFR aircraft can rely on their instruments in bad visibility, there is no visibility minima. Lastly, in terms of what aircraft will use to navigate, IFR can pretty much use everything available, including waypoints, SIDS and stars, which you'll learn about in the next lesson, and receive ATC vectors. VFR aircraft can use waypoints at their own discretion, but they cannot explicitly file a SID or star and won't receive vectors from ATC. The flight rules can definitely be confusing, so make sure to ask any questions if you have any. Now, while those were the two main types of flight rules, there are additional services that VFR aircraft can request to receive, making for some quote-unquote variations of VFR. VFR flight following, which we'll abbreviate as VFR-FF, is where VFR aircraft is watched and taken care of by the radar controller, usually approach and departure, to mainly receive traffic advisories. This will keep them aware of any traffic around them and help them stay separated from that traffic. Special VFR, for our service purposes, is a form of VFR that pilots can opt for without the required visibility minima of 5 kilometers. Special VFR provides flight following and additional attention from the radar controller for navigation, separation, and/or obstruction clearance. Our next topic is squawk codes. A squawk code is a 4-digit code assigned to an aircraft that, in the real world, helps the radar identify an aircraft and provide the speed and altitude information of that aircraft to the radar controller. These codes will never contain an 8 or a 9. In real life, aircraft are equipped with a transponder like the device pictured here, where they set the assigned squawk code. However, there is no such device in Flightline, so the squawk codes are just simulated for realism. There are a couple squawk codes reserved for emergency situations that help pilots communicate their situation without talking to ATC, in case they are unable to. For example, if a hijacking were to occur and the pilot needed to discreetly inform ATC of this, they would simply enter 7500 into their transponder and the controller would know. Keep in mind that simulating a hijacking scenario in this server is not allowed. 7600 is the squawk code representing a communication failure with ATC, and 7700 is the most common and used for any emergency not covered by the other two emergency squawk codes. In the real world, on the controller scope, a blinking red text would indicate that a pilot is squawking one of these emergency squawks and alerts the controller that an emergency is in progress. We won't go over what to do when an emergency occurs yet, since delivery controllers won't handle emergency aircraft, but you will need to know these squawk codes. Lastly for this lesson is the ATIS, which stands for Automatic Terminal Information Service. The ATIS is an automated broadcast, and on this server we have bots to help us, that provides information on the weather and airport operations to the pilots. Pilots are required to advise controllers that they have this information before they start their flight, so they will do this by using the information letter. The information letter is a letter from the ICAO phonetic alphabet, which you'll see in a later lesson, that is like a password for pilots saying that they have the current ATIS information. The ATIS is supposed to be updated every hour, and when that happens, the ATIS letter, or password, will update to the next letter of the phonetic alphabet. For example, information alpha, or A, would update to information bravo, or B. The most important bit of information for controllers here is usually the active runways and visibility. Both the active runways and ATIS are set by tower. That concludes your first lesson getting into some actual ATC material, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you ever have any questions. With that, we'll see you on the scopes.